The grand ballroom shimmered with golden light as the chandeliers above sparkled like 1,000 captured stars, and the scent of roses and fine wine filled the air, where men in black tuxedos and women in gowns of emerald violet and crimson glided across polished marble floors, and in the center of it all stood a man whose name carried weight in the city. A single dad, a powerful CEO who had built an empire brick by brick and sacrifice by sacrifice. But despite the grandeur surrounding him, his heart had carried a quiet emptiness ever since life had left him alone with his young daughter, who was his only true source of warmth and reason to keep moving. He had never imagined that one day he would ask his maid, the young woman who had entered his life in the simplest of ways, to become part of a plan that sounded absurd even to his own ears. Yet circumstances had demanded it, because at this party, he was expected to appear with someone who would silence the whispers about his loneliness, someone who would prove to his rivals and to the powerful families in attendance that he was not weak, not vulnerable, and not a man to be pitied. So he had looked at her that morning, the woman who cleaned his home with diligence, who sang softly to his daughter while folding laundry, who always lowered her eyes when speaking to him, and with hesitation in his voice, he had said, "Will you be my girlfriend? Just for tonight?" She had stared at him in shock, her hands still wet from rinsing a crystal glass, her lips parting as if she had not heard him right. And when he clarified that it was only pretend, that it was for his reputation and nothing more, her cheeks had flushed with both disbelief and fear. But deep inside, her chest a hidden spark had fluttered, because this man, though he lived in a world of wealth and prestige, had never once treated her with cruelty. He always thanked her softly, always noticed when she was tired, always made sure she ate at least once during her long hours of work, and for reasons she could never confess, she had already been carrying a secret affection for him. So she nodded slowly, though her heart beat wildly. Now here they were at the gala, surrounded by eyes that measured power like currency. She wore a dress borrowed from the CEO's late mother's collection, a gown of deep green that clung to her gently and made her look like she belonged to that world, though she knew she did not. And when he held her hand, guiding her to the center of the dance floor, she could feel the electricity of his touch running through her skin, as if it were meant to be there. The orchestra swelled and they began to move together, his strong hand resting lightly on her back, his gaze fixed on her face with such intensity that for a moment she forgot it was all pretend. But not everyone was pleased with the sight of them together. Among the crowd was a woman in a white gown, her figure tall and poised, her expression sharp as a blade. She had long believed she would be the one to stand at his side. She came from a family of wealth and influence, one that had always pushed her toward him, because their union would merge two empires. But now she stood at the edge of the ballroom, her arms folded, her eyes narrowed, watching the maid in the arms of the man she thought she owned. Jealousy coiled within her like a viper. And though she wore the gown of a bride, she was no bride tonight. She was an uninvited storm. As the dance continued, the CEO leaned closer, his voice low and meant only for the woman in green. "You are doing well," he murmured, "better than I ever imagined." And she whispered back, "I am only following your lead." Yet, inside, her heart trembled with feelings she could no longer ignore, because the way he looked at her did not feel like acting. The way his hand tightened ever so slightly around her waist felt protective, real dangerous. Across the hall, people whispered. Some wondered who she was. Some doubted her place at his side, but others noticed the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. A softness he had never shown before, not even to the elegant woman in white, who now burned with fury, watching them as if her entire world was slipping away. Tion, CEO had not planned for this night to stir his heart. He had told himself it was business strategy, nothing more. But as the music swelled and her laughter brushed against his ear like the gentlest melody, he realized he was no longer pretending. He was no longer dancing with a maid. He was holding a woman who had unknowingly stolen pieces of him with every quiet act of kindness she had shown him and his daughter, and for the first time in years, he felt alive. The woman in white finally stepped forward, her heels striking the marble floor with sharp echoes demanding attention, and the crowd parted slightly as she approached, her eyes flashing with fire. She stopped before them, and with a voice both sweet and poisonous, she said, "Did not expect to see you with her," as though the word "her" was a stain unworthy of utterance. The music faltered, the dancers around them stilled, and all eyes turned toward the confrontation. The maid lowered her gaze, her heart sinking, afraid that the fragile illusion would shatter in an instant. But before she could step away, the CEO tightened his grip and raised his head, his voice calm but commanding. "She is with me," he said firmly, and in those words was a declaration that went far beyond pretense, because though the night had begun as an act, it was ending as a revelation that his heart had chosen her, not because of status, not because of pressure, but because love had found him where he least expected it. The ballroom buzzed with murmurs, some shocked, some thrilled. The woman in white paled, her lips pressing into a thin line before she turned sharply and walked away, her pride wounded and her plans broken. And as the orchestra slowly resumed its melody, the CEO pulled the maid closer, whispering against her ear, "I asked you to pretend, but now I find I do not want this to end." And she trembled in his arms as her heart whispered the same truth, that she too had been captured by a love that began as a lie but revealed itself to be the only real thing in the room that night.